Hello, everyone. Today we are going to talk about subject-verb agreement in English and how that works. Now, before we get into it today, you'll need to remember a couple of key concepts about what a subject is, what a verb is, and what an object is in a sentence. So we're going to run through a really quick review here. First off, you already know that a verb is an action. A verb is an action. So the verb in the sentence is the thing that is happening, the action that is happening in the sentence. The subject of the sentence is whoever or whatever does that verb. And then the object of the sentence is the thing that is being acted upon in the sentence. So for instance, if I said the boy kicked the ball, we're going to start with the verb. The verb is kicked. That's the action happening in that sentence. The subject is the boy because that's the person or the thing that is doing the verb, that is doing the kicking. And then the ball is the object because that is the thing being acted upon. So now that we know those rules, let's get into the dynamics of subject-verb agreement. Now, the first thing that I want to start with is talking about the difference between singular and plural. Singular means there's just one item. The girl, the man, the dog, so on and so forth. Plural means that there's more than one. Girls, men, dogs, so on and so forth. That difference should feel fairly familiar to you. Singular means one, plural means more than one. That is going to be really important today, though. So when I say singular, you need to know that that means just one. Plural means more than one. Now, here's why that matters a lot. I have two sentences, and we're going to read both of them, and then we're going to talk about how they relate to this idea of subject-verb agreement. So example 1, the man at the table was talking on the phone. Example 2, the men at the table were talking on their phones. Now, as you can see, the difference here is example 1 has a singular subject, man. There's just one. Example 2 has a plural subject, men. There's more than one. And when our subject is singular or plural, our verb needs to change in order to match that subject. So in other words, if we look at example 1, the man is singular. And so then we are going to use the verb phrase was talking. In example 2, the subject is the men, which is plural, and so we're going to use the verb phrase were talking. That's what subject-verb agreement is. The number of your subject, singular or plural, needs to agree, it needs to match with your verb. So in other words, we use certain verbs when we have singular subjects, and then we use other verbs when we have plural subjects. And so today we're going to be spending some time looking at how those verbs change and how they work together. Again, if your subject is singular, your verb needs to be singular. If your subject is plural, your verb needs to be plural. Now let's get into a little bit more detail here. First off, I want to talk about how we make a noun plural, and this should feel like a review for you. We make a noun plural simply by adding an S to the end of the word, usually. This isn't always the case, but usually that's the case. So some examples: dogs, boxes, cars, girls, boys, all of those, we take the noun, boy, car, dog, whatever it is, and we put an S at the end of it, and that makes it plural. The weird thing about English, though, is to make a verb plural, we actually do the opposite, and we drop the S at the end. And again, this is usually, not all the time, but usually this is how it works. So, for instance, run without an S is going to be the plural form of runs. Play without an S is going to be the plural form of plays. It's going to help to look at some examples. So let's jump into those. Let's look at the incorrect sentence first. The students in biology 1010 usually goes on a field trip each spring. Now, if you've been speaking and writing English for a long time, you could probably feel that that is incorrect. The reason that that is incorrect is because students, our subject is plural, and then goes is actually singular. And those two things need to match. Our subject needs to match our verb. Our subject needs to agree with our verb. Now, an easy way to remember this and an easy way to check for this is to think to yourself that between the subject and the verb, you only get one S. So in other words, if there is an S at the end of the subject, there probably should not be an S at the end of the verb. The flip side also applies. If there is an S at the end of the verb, there probably should not be an S at the end of the subject. So let's look at the correct example. The students in biology 1010 usually go on a field trip each spring. Now you can see that this one works. This one's fine because our subject is plural and our verb is plural. We only have one S at the end of those words. Students has the S at the end, so we do not put an S at the end of go. Now again, we need our subject to match our verb. The way we do that is by checking to make sure that both of them are singular or both of them are plural. We make nouns plural by adding an S. We make verbs plural by dropping an S. And what that means is that we should only have one S at the end. It either goes at the end of our noun or our subject, or it goes at the end of our verb. Let's check out some more examples. Incorrect first. In the trunk of my car resides 15 water bottles. Now the problem with this is our verb is resides, that has an S at the end of it, and our subject is water bottles, and that also has an S at the end of it. That's a problem. They don't agree, they don't match. So the correct version of this would be in the trunk of my car reside 15 water bottles. Now we've taken the S off of the verb, and now it works. Now it matches because there is only one S at the end. Now, we're going to make this just a little bit more complicated today, and we're going to talk about some strange rules that also apply to subject-verb agreement. Let me show you this sentence, and then we'll talk about it. Either the class officers or the faculty advisor makes the final decision. Now, this sentence is tricky because we have one verb and we have two subjects. Our verb is makes. That has an S at the end of it. Our subjects are class officers and faculty advisor. One of those has an S at the end of it, but one of them does not. So is this correct or is this not correct? Well, the way that we figure it out is when we have a or between the two subjects. So you can see how it says or the. If we have an or between the two of them, then what we're going to do is we are going to make our verb match with the subject that it is closest to. Our verb is makes, and that is closer to the subject faculty advisor than it is to class officers. And so we're going to make our verb match up with faculty advisor. Now you'll remember that if our verb is plural, our subject also needs to be plural, which means that we only have one S. Our S is at the end of the verb. We don't have an S at the end of our subject, faculty advisor. Therefore, this sentence is correct. We're going to ignore the class officers because we are making our verb match with the subject it is closest to because there is the word or between those two subjects. However, if we put the word and between our two subjects, so in this sentence, the class officers and the faculty advisor make the final decision. If we have an and between the two subjects, then we make the verb match all of it together. And what I mean by that is because we have multiple class officers and a faculty advisor, that's multiple people all together. We're looking at the subject all together. Because there's multiple people, when we add all of them together, that means that our subject is plural and a verb must also be plural, which means that we do not put an S on our verb. So that's the tricky difference here. When we have an or, we match the verb to the subject it's closest to. When we have an and, that just means that we're combining all of the subjects together, which means that our subject is plural, and our verb should be plural too. Now, today we talked about subject-verb agreement, which basically just means that if the subject of our sentence is singular, the verb must also be singular. If the subject is plural, the verb must also be plural. The tricky part of this is that to make a verb plural, we drop the S at the end of it. So the opposite of what we do with nouns. So the easiest way to remember this is if your subject has an S at the end of it, your verb should not. If your verb has an S at the end of it, your subject should not. Only one of them gets an S at the end. Thank you so much for watching today. I really appreciate it.